Look at your hands right now. Look at the device you are holding, the glowing screen you are staring into. What would happen if it suddenly went perfectly, completely black? I do not mean for a minute, and I do not mean while you are waiting for a train. I mean, what if you were forced to sit in a room entirely alone with no music, no notifications, no ambient noise, and absolutely no way out? Does the mere thought of that absolute silence make your chest tighten? Does it make you feel a sudden inexplicable sense of dread, a claustrophobia that you cannot quite explain? If it does, I want you to know that I understand, because I used to be terrified of that exact same silence. We are running, all of us, running as fast as our exhausted minds will carry us, but we have absolutely no idea what is actually chasing us. We think we are chasing information, connection, or entertainment, but that is a comforting lie we tell ourselves just to survive the day. The brutal truth is that we are not running toward anything at all. We are running away. We are running from the stranger that wears our face in the mirror. Welcome to Myth Eryndor. I am here to walk alongside you into the deepest, darkest corners of the human psyche, to face the harsh truths that most people spend their entire lives desperately avoiding. If you are ready to stop running, if you want to support this journey of psychological awakening so we can continue creating these deep explorations together, please hit the subscribe button right now. Your support gives us the fuel to keep shedding light on the shadows of the modern mind. Now let me tell you why that silence terrifies you so much. It is a condition that defines our modern era, an unspoken psychological epidemic that society has collectively agreed to ignore. Psychologists might call it monophobia, the fear of being alone, but I promise you, it is much deeper and much darker than simply missing the company of other people. It is the profound, paralyzing dread of being left alone with your own unedited, unfiltered thoughts. Think about it for a moment. When you lie in bed at night, exhausted to your very bones, why do you keep scrolling through endless, meaningless digital feeds? Your eyes are burning, your body is begging for rest, yet your thumb keeps moving in a hypnotic, desperate rhythm. You are not absorbing that information, and you do not actually care about what you are seeing. You are administering a psychological anesthetic. You are desperately trying to numb your brain so that the voices in your own head do not have a chance to speak. Because the moment the screen goes dark, the moment the ambient noise fades, the silence rushes in like cold water into a sinking ship. And in that silence, you are forced to hear the things you have spent years trying to drown out. The lingering regrets, the quiet, gnawing feeling that you are not doing what you are meant to do, and the profound sense of emptiness despite all your hard-earned achievements. I know this fear intimately. I know what it feels like to fill every waking second with a podcast, a video, or a song just to avoid the deafening echo of my own mind. I realized that my productivity, my constant need to be entertained or informed, was nothing but a highly sophisticated coping mechanism. I was a highly functional, highly distracted fugitive from my own soul. In the 17th century, long before algorithms were engineered to hijack our dopamine, the philosopher Blaise Pascal saw this exact tragedy unfolding. He wrote a sentence that is more devastatingly accurate today than it was the day he penned it. He stated, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Read that again in your mind and feel the weight of it. All of our misery, our impulsive mistakes, our desperate seeking of validation, it all traces back to our absolute inability to tolerate our own company. We have built an invisible prison around ourselves, constructed not of iron bars, but of constant, relentless stimulation. We are the architects of our own captivity, and we lock the door from the inside because we believe the outside world of silence is simply too dangerous. But this prison does not keep the danger out. It locks you in with it. We mistake connectivity for connection. We have thousands of digital interactions, yet we are starving for true intimacy, primarily the intimacy with our own true selves. This constant distraction is not a harmless habit. It is a state of severe psychological emergency. It is a deliberate suppression of your own existence, preventing you from doing the necessary grueling archaeological work on your own spirit. You are choosing to be asleep because being awake to your own inner reality has become too painful. But how long can you hold your breath underwater before your lungs give out? How long can you run from your own shadow before it inevitably swallows you whole? This is the terrifying question that the silence demands you answer. To answer that question, we must first tear down the greatest illusion of our modern existence, the comforting lie that being surrounded by the crowd means you are no longer alone. I remember looking at my own life, immersed in a sea of digital avatars, endless group chats, and the constant hum of virtual approval, yet feeling a cold, hollow ache expanding in my chest. We have fundamentally confused two vastly different states of being, intertwining them so deeply that we no longer recognize the poison we are drinking. We have confused loneliness with solitude. Loneliness is a state of desperate, agonizing lack. It is a starvation of the soul, a condition where you operate from a place of severe deficit, begging the external world to validate your existence. When you are lonely, you are pleading with the tribe to tell you that you matter, that you are seen, that you belong. Solitude, on the other hand, is a state of absolute unapologetic fullness. It is the deliberate, courageous choice to sit with yourself and discover that the room is not empty at all, but rather occupied by the most complex, formidable entity you will ever encounter. But our society does not teach us how to cultivate this quiet power. Instead, it weaponizes our primal fear of isolation, herding us into the suffocating, inescapable embrace of the digital tribe. To survive in this crowded, hyperconnected arena, we do something deeply tragic to our own psychology. We begin to forge a mask. In the realm of analytical psychology, this is known as the persona. It is a carefully curated, meticulously engineered version of yourself designed for one specific purpose: to be palatable, agreeable, and entirely unthreatening to the herd. You learn to post the right opinions, you force yourself to laugh at the right jokes, and you ruthlessly silence the dangerous, authentic parts of your mind because you are terrified of digital exile. You dilute the potent essence of your soul until it becomes an odorless, tasteless liquid easily swallowed by the masses without causing them any discomfort. And for a while the strategy appears to work perfectly. The crowd applauds, the likes roll in, the social validation floods your nervous system, and the mask feels like a permanent fixture. But I know the secret, bone-deep exhaustion that crashes over you when the screen finally turns off. I know the terror of being left alone in the dark with a face that no longer feels like your own. You realize with a sinking stomach that the crowd does not actually love you. They only love the artificial mask you built to appease them. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard saw this modern tragedy with absolute piercing clarity. He left us a philosophical warning that should echo in the mind of every individual striving for authenticity. The crowd is untruth. Kierkegaard understood that the moment you surrender your unique individuality to the consensus of the group, you step out of reality and into a collective delusion. The crowd does not seek truth, and it does not seek greatness. It seeks only comfort and conformity. It demands absolute compliance, punishing anyone who dares to disrupt the shared hallucination with a dissenting thought or a genuine expression of self. When you tie your identity to this untruth, when you hand over the keys of your self-worth to the nameless, faceless mob, you birth a deep, quiet despair within your own spirit. It is the existential dread of knowing that you are merely playing a background role in a play you did not write, reciting hollow lines you do not actually believe. You trade the chaotic beauty of your authentic existence for the warm, suffocating blanket of group approval. And the longer you wear this mask, the more your true, vital self begins to wither and suffocate underneath it. To break this cycle, to reclaim the territory of your own mind, we have to endure the severe pain of extraction. We have to look to uncompromising minds like Friedrich Nietzsche, a thinker who did not view isolation as a curse, but as the ultimate necessary crucible for human greatness. Nietzsche looked at the masses with a cold, unwavering clarity, identifying them as the herd. The herd moves together, thinks together, and stays safe together, but it is fundamentally incapable of reaching the mountain peaks of human potential. Nietzsche believed that the authentic individual has always had to struggle violently to keep from being overwhelmed and absorbed by the tribe. If you choose to try it, if you choose to step away, he warned that you will be lonely often and sometimes deeply frightened. I want to validate that fear for you right now, in this very moment. Stepping away from the comforting, hypnotic hum of the crowd is genuinely terrifying. It feels like stepping off the edge of the known world into an abyss. Your nervous system, wired over millennia for tribal survival, will scream at you to turn back, to put the mask back on, to apologize for your divergence, and beg for readmission. But Nietzsche offers us a profound, life-altering reassurance. No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Think about the immense gravity of that statement. The ultimate privilege of owning yourself. Right now, if you are honest, the algorithms own a piece of you. The unspoken expectations of your peers own a piece of you. The paralyzing fear of public judgment owns the rest. To reclaim your psychological deed, to become the absolute, unchallenged sovereign of your own mind, you must be willing to walk away from the noise. Solitude is not a punishment handed down to those who fail at playing the social game. It is the mandatory, non-negotiable toll you must pay on the road to self-mastery and profound personal greatness. You cannot forge a masterpiece out of your life while constantly asking a committee of strangers for permission on every single brushstroke. You must leave the stifling, comfortable valley of the herd and begin the solitary, arduous climb up the mountain. It will be incredibly quiet. It will be bitterly cold. But as the chaotic voices of the crowd finally fade into the distance, you will begin to hear something miraculous. You will finally hear a voice that has been buried and silenced for years, your own. But hearing that authentic voice for the first time is rarely a comforting experience. In fact, the raw, unfiltered sound of your own truth is the exact reason why stepping into the silence feels so utterly agonizing. When you finally step away from the crowd, when you put down the glowing screens and sit alone in the quiet of an empty room, you do not immediately find peace. Peace is a romanticized lie sold to us by modern wellness culture. What you actually find in those first few excruciating moments of true isolation is chaos. You feel a physical withdrawal, a violent resistance from a nervous system that has been conditioned to demand a relentless stream of external stimuli. Your brain begs for a distraction, pleading with you to open a tab check, a message, or simply turn on some background noise to fill the void. It is trying to protect you. It is trying to protect you because your subconscious knows exactly what is waiting for you in the dark. When the noise of the crowd finally fades and the artificial light of your digital persona is extinguished, you are stripped of your psychological defenses. You are no longer the curated, agreeable character you play for your peers, your colleagues, or your family. You are forced to embark on the most terrifying, grueling journey a human being can undertake, the archaeological work of the soul. You are stepping out of the comfortable, sunlit streets of your conscious life and descending into the cold, unpredictable catacombs of your own mind. This is not a peaceful meditation retreat. This is a severe, unforgiving psychological laboratory. And as you dig beneath the fragile topsoil of your manufactured identity, you will inevitably strike something hard, something ancient, and something deeply unsettling. You will come face to face with the stranger that lives in your own basement. The pioneering psychoanalyst Carl Jung gave a name to this stranger. He called it the shadow. The shadow is not an abstract, mystical concept. It is a very real, incredibly dense accumulation of everything within you that you have rejected. From the time you were a small child, you were taught what was acceptable and what was dangerous. You learned that your anger made people pull away. You learned that your selfishness was punished, that your wildness was inconvenient, and that your darkest curiosities were shameful. To survive, to be loved, and to secure your place in the tribe, you took all of those unacceptable fragments of your humanity and you shoved them down into the dark. You amputated parts of your own spirit, threw them into the abyss of your unconscious mind, and locked the door. But the things we bury in the psyche do not die. They ferment, they grow, they mutate in the darkness, acquiring a life and a gravity of their own. For years you have been desperately running from this shadow, projecting your own hidden flaws onto the people around you. You judge others harshly for the exact sins you secretly harbor in your own heart. You consume endless hours of meaningless content simply to ensure that the noise in your head is loud enough to drown out the knocking at the basement door. But here, in the absolute solitude of this empty room, there is nowhere left to run. There is no one left to project your darkness onto. You are completely alone, and yet the room is full. The walls of your conscious reality begin to melt away, revealing a surreal, almost Dali-esque landscape within your own mind. Time loses its linear structure. The past is no longer behind you. It is happening right now, swirling around you in the silence. The memories you tried so desperately to forget, the intense guilt you tried to rationalize away, the profound inadequacies you have attempted to cover up with a lifetime of frantic achievements, they all rise from the depths. They stand before you, grotesque and undeniable, demanding to be witnessed. This is the psychological emergency of the modern individual. We are so profoundly terrified of our own darkness that we refuse to enter the cave, preferring to live a shallow, fragmented existence in the safe, artificial light. But Jung issued a warning that should shake you to your very core. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Think about the destructive patterns that have haunted your life. Think about the relationships you have inexplicably sabotaged, the opportunities you have inexplicably ruined, and the sudden explosive bursts of anger or despair that seem to come from nowhere. You look at the wreckage of your life, and you call it bad luck. You call it circumstance. You call it fate. But it is not fate. It is your shadow operating from the dark, pulling the strings of your behavior, because you refuse to turn on the light and look it in the eye. When you sit in solitude, the shadow finally has the floor. It speaks to you in the language of intrusive thoughts, of sudden anxiety, of a crushing weight on your chest. It shows you the bitter resentment you hold toward your parents. It shows you the jealousy you harbor toward your closest friends. It shows you the terrifying capacity for malice and destruction that exists within your own heart. And in that moment, the illusion of your own moral purity is shattered completely. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing a person can do is to accept themselves completely. It is easy to accept your virtues, your talents, and your kindness. It is an act of supreme, almost unbearable courage to accept that you are also the architect of your own misery, and that you carry the potential for profound evil within your own psyche. But this realization is not meant to destroy you. It is the necessary crucible through which you must pass to become whole. The goal of this grueling internal archaeology is not to defeat the shadow. You cannot kill a part of yourself. You cannot permanently banish the darkness without also extinguishing the light. The ultimate goal of this solitary confrontation is what analytical psychology calls individuation. Individuation is the arduous, lifelong process of bringing the scattered, rejected fragments of your soul back together. It is the act of looking at the ugliest, most shameful parts of your history and saying, yes, this too is me. When you stop fighting your shadow, when you sit quietly in the room and simply observe the terrifying creatures of your own unconscious mind without running away, something miraculous begins to happen. The demons lose their power over you. The suppressed anger, the hidden ambition, the raw animalistic drive that you buried so long ago, these are not inherently evil forces. They are simply raw, unrefined energy. When they are locked in the basement, they rot and become toxic, leaking poison into your daily life. But when you drag them up into the light of your conscious awareness, when you face them bravely in the silence of your solitude, they transform. The very things that once terrified you become the furnace that powers your resilience. You realize that the aggressive energy you hid away to be a good person is the exact same energy you need to set firm boundaries and protect yourself from a world that wants to consume you. You realize that your deep hidden insecurities, once acknowledged and accepted, become the foundation of your capacity for genuine, profound empathy toward others. You cannot heal a wound you refuse to look at, and you cannot master a beast you refuse to name. The silence of this room is the only place where the beast can be named. It is the only place where you can strip away the comforting lies of the persona and do the bloody necessary work of integration. This is why you must endure the discomfort of being alone. This is why you must not reach for the phone when the anxiety begins to rise in your throat. You are standing at the threshold of your own becoming. If you flinch now, if you run back to the safety of the crowd and the anesthesia of the digital world, you will remain a fractured, incomplete version of yourself for the rest of your life. You will continue to be a hostage to your own unrecognized depths. But if you can hold your ground, if you can stare into the Dali-esque nightmare of your own unresolved trauma and refuse to blink, you initiate the profound alchemy of the soul. You gather the broken pieces of your identity from the floor of the catacombs and forge them into something unbreakable. You stop trying to be perfectly good, and you finally accept the terrifying, magnificent responsibility of becoming entirely, undeniably whole. When you finally stand your ground and accept that terrifying, magnificent responsibility of your own wholeness, the abyss you so desperately feared ceases to be a place of destruction and slowly transforms into the very forge of your resilience. For the longest time, you believed that isolation was a void that would simply swallow you whole. You thought the silence was a cold absence of life, a vacuum designed to suffocate your spirit. But as the dust of your shattered artificial persona finally settles, you begin to perceive the profound architecture of the empty room. The panic attacks slowly subside. The desperate, clawing craving for a glowing screen, a distracting voice, or a meaningless notification begins to lose its tyrannical grip on your nervous system. You realize that the darkness of true solitude is not empty at all. It is incredibly dense, pregnant with absolute untamed potential. You have survived the initial brutal shock of facing your own shadow. You did not die when you looked directly at your deepest flaws. You did not physically shatter when you acknowledged your hidden reservoirs of shame, your suppressed anger, or the haunting echoes of your past failures. Instead, you experienced a strange, unexpected, and almost intoxicating liberation. When you stop spending all your daily psychological energy trying to hold up a heavy counterfeit mask for the world to applaud, a massive amount of life force is suddenly returned to you. The question now becomes an existential one. What will you do with this raw, unrefined power? How do you forge genuine meaning in a space where all external validation, all applause, and all societal markers of success have been violently stripped away? To understand the sheer magnitude of what is possible in the depths of absolute isolation, we must look to those whose psychological fortitude was pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance. We must turn our gaze to the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. Frankl was not theorizing about resilience from the comfort of a warm, privileged university office. He was thrust into the unimaginable mechanical horrors of the Nazi concentration camps during the darkest chapter of human history. He was systematically stripped of every single thing that modern society tells us we desperately need to maintain our identity and our sanity. His beloved family was taken from him. His life's work, the manuscript he had poured his soul into, was confiscated and destroyed. His professional title, his basic human dignity, his clothing, and his physical freedom were violently erased. He was reduced to a mere number, subjected to daily starvation, bone-chilling cold, and the constant, arbitrary, and unpredictable threat of sudden execution. By all conventional psychological metrics, a human being placed in that environment should collapse entirely into a state of catatonic despair and absolute nihilism. When the external world becomes an inescapable, torturous hell, the mind is expected to shatter into irreparable pieces. But in that absolute devastating isolation, surrounded by death and stripped of all earthly possessions, Frankl made a discovery that forever altered our understanding of the human soul. He discovered that even when every physical liberty is violently stolen from you, there is an inner sanctum that no guard, no torturer, and no tyrant can ever breach. He wrote that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. I want you to pause and truly feel the immense weight of that realization. In the darkest abyss humanity has ever created, Frankl realized that his solitary mind was an impenetrable fortress. The guards could break his physical body, but they could not force him to hate them. They could dictate his physical movements, locking him behind barbed wire, but they could absolutely not dictate how he assigned meaning to his own suffering. Frankl proved with his own blood and survival that meaning is not something you find neatly packaged in the external world. Meaning is not handed to you by a successful career, a perfect relationship, or a flawless social reputation. Meaning is a defiant, radical, and profoundly creative act of the will forged strictly in the fires of your own solitary consciousness. When you sit in your empty room feeling overwhelmed by the tragedies of your own life, the failures of your past, or the crushing weight of modern existential emptiness, remember Viktor Frankl. You are not a helpless, fragile victim of your circumstances. When the noise of the crowd is gone and the digital anesthetic wears off, you are forced to take absolute, uncompromising responsibility for your internal architecture. You realize that your despair is not a permanent, unchangeable condition. It is a choice you are making in how you interpret your reality. Your suffering only remains meaningless if you cowardly refuse to assign a higher purpose to it. In the quiet of your solitude, you reclaim the ultimate freedom to sculpt your own psychological grandeur, deciding exactly who you will be regardless of what chaotic forces the world throws at you. But possessing this profound existential freedom requires an equally profound psychological strength. It requires a resilience that can only be built by intentionally stepping away from the ordered, predictable, and infantile distractions of modern society. This brings us to the crucial psychological insights of Jordan Peterson, who speaks extensively on the absolute necessity of voluntarily confronting chaos. Our modern digitally connected world is an illusion of artificial order. It is a heavily curated, algorithmically controlled environment designed specifically to keep you safe, comfortable, and endlessly, mindlessly amused. But reality itself is not safe, and it is certainly not predictable. Tragedy, severe illness, brutal betrayal, and inevitable death are the inescapable objective realities of the human condition. If you spend your entire life hiding from these truths in the shallow, ordered waters of social media validation and constant entertainment, you will remain incredibly fragile. The moment real chaos inevitably strikes your life, the moment you lose someone you love, or your carefully planned career collapses, or your physical health betrays you, you will shatter into a million unrecoverable pieces. You will have built no internal structure, no load-bearing walls in your psyche to withstand the storm. Solitude, true uncompromising solitude, is a voluntary, deliberate descent into that chaos. When you turn off the screen, silence the music, and sit alone with your unedited thoughts, you are stepping completely out of the artificial order and facing the terrifying unknown of your own potential. You are deliberately exposing yourself to the unpredictable, chaotic forces of your own psyche. Peterson teaches us that it is only through this voluntary, courageous confrontation with the unknown that a new, fundamentally stronger being can emerge. When you force yourself to sit in the silence, enduring the anxiety and the urge to run, you are essentially lifting heavy psychological weights. You are intentionally stressing your emotional nervous system, tearing down the weak, atrophied muscle fibers of your dependency on other people's opinions, and forcing your mind to rebuild itself stronger, denser, and far more resilient. You learn slowly and painfully to tolerate your own severe limitations. You stare directly into the terrible, dizzying uncertainty of your own existence, and you realize something incredibly empowering. You do not need to be rescued. You realize that you are entirely capable of bearing the heavy cross of your own consciousness. This is exactly how you build a stable, unshakable character. You stop being a fragile, trembling leaf, constantly blown around by the shifting winds of public opinion, digital outrage, and fleeting social trends. You become an immovable, deeply rooted tree, driving your psychological roots deep into the bedrock of your own discovered integrated truth. You become a person of immense gravity, someone who can be relied upon when the artificial world around you inevitably falls apart. Because you have already voluntarily faced the darkness in the terrifying quiet of your own room, you will not panic when the darkness manifests in the real world. This is the magnificent, life-altering reward of the archaeological work we do in solitude. We do not sit alone simply to torture ourselves with our past mistakes, nor do we isolate ourselves to dwell morbidly on our inherent flaws. We enter the terrifying crucible of the shadow so that we can emerge with a weapon forged from our own integrated, brutal truth. We deliberately isolate ourselves so that we can discover the incorruptible, radiant freedom that Viktor Frankl found in the darkest of places. We face the internal chaos of our own minds so that we can build the unshakable, tragic resilience that allows us to stand tall in a broken world. The abyss of solitude is not your enemy, and the silence is not a punishment. The abyss is your greatest, most demanding teacher. It ruthlessly burns away everything that is false, everything that is cheaply borrowed from the crowd, and everything that makes you weak and compliant. What is left in the smoldering aftermath of that psychological fire is the only thing that actually matters in this brief, chaotic life. What is left is the absolute, undeniable core of who you truly are. And when you finally possess that core, when you finally hold the reins of your own existence with a firm, unyielding grip, the world and its invisible prisons can never capture you again. Once you realize that your true strength is forged in the fires of isolation, the act of retreating into silence is no longer a surrender but a fiercely deliberate choice. Embracing solitude in our modern era is not a symptom of social failure or psychological weakness. It is, in fact, the most radical act of rebellion you can possibly commit against a world that constantly monetizes your attention and profits directly from your endless distraction. Society wants you anxious, entirely dependent on external validation, and terrified of your own quiet company, because a distracted mind is incredibly easy to control. When you choose to disconnect, you are staging a quiet revolution within the borders of your own consciousness. You are reclaiming the sovereign territory of your time, your space, and your unedited thoughts from a digital machine that views you merely as a data point. We have spent enough of our precious finite lives running away from ourselves. We have consumed enough superficial productivity hacks and toxic positivity that simply tell us to stay busy until the existential dread magically disappears. It never disappears. It only waits for the noise to stop. So it is time to do the real heavy work. I am not going to end this with a polite generic request for your engagement, because your psychological survival is worth far more than a fleeting moment of digital interaction. Instead, I'm going to issue you a direct, uncompromising challenge right here and right now. Do not scroll to the next video to keep the dopamine drip flowing. Do not open another tab to anesthetize your mind and erase the heavy truths we just uncovered. I challenge you to turn off this screen the moment my voice stops speaking. Put the device down, physically walk away from it, and sit in absolute silence for just 15 minutes. Face the stranger that wears your face. Listen to what the unconscious mind has been desperately trying to tell you, and endure the agonizing discomfort until it finally breaks open and transforms into absolute clarity. If you are genuinely tired of easy answers, and if you are finally ready to stop running and face the brutal truths of your own depths, then make the choice to subscribe to Myth Eryndor. Join a community of individuals who are committed to the brutal, liberating archaeological work of the human soul. Turn the screen off, because the real journey begins in the dark. I will meet you again in the depths.